Namaskar and welcome to this exciting episode of Sattology Debunking Mythology. Today we are speaking about the urgent priorities or urgencies for Hindus in North America. But the perspective is coming from people who have already done in the Western Hemisphere, in UK. So what we do, what are the issues on which the people are going to affect our community or our community will be challenged. So we are going to discuss with this very special eminent guest. You have seen him earlier on the shows. So let us welcome Pandit Satish Sharma.
Pranamji,
Pranam.
Namaskar It's a pleasure to be here with you. I look forward to a very interesting conversation and exchange. We have some very powerful contributions to make, and the more people who can understand them, engage with them, the better it is for all of us. So thank you for the opportunity and for the platform to share some ideas.
Thank you, Pandit Satish Sharma ji. First of all, the way that you have single-handedly, like from many years back, I heard the we never works. It's the I who works. So, how important is that individual activism in more important, equally important than we? Because we're all looking for we, but nobody does anything at the end of the day. So, and when somebody says I, then we shoot him down that you're arrogant. So, both sides are confused now. So, what
So
is the
the
right way?
what a wonderful place to start. You have started right at the end of the Bhagavad Gita. Okay, having bypassed all of the 70 and a half chapters, you come to that point, which is, what should I do? And that's an excellent starting point. So we have, we are at the end of a period of human experience, which has been unlike anything before. Most of the world was colonized by a very strong I identity. If you remember Macaulay's famous words, he said, what we want to do is to create Indians who look like Indians, but to all intents and purposes, their identity is completely a British English identity. And so they were fully aware that the I was something which was malleable. It was something which could be sculpted. It was something that could be contorted, twisted, and designed according to a particular person's desire. And they were very successful. And right now, in this day and age, we have a huge number of people from the Indian civilization whose ancestors and whose genes are from ancient Hindu lineages. And yet their thoughts are completely the thoughts which have been received from an alien civilization, and they don't know it. So they are, we often call them Macaulay's minions, but they are victims of a long-range plan to create a particular type of I, a subservient I. So the I is very, very important. The question is, what sort of an I is it? Now, this is where I think the Sanatani, the Dharmic, the Indian civilization has a vast amount of knowledge about how this I develops, what seeds need to be planted, how do we cultivate it in such a manner that it can traverse the journey of life and existence in as ebullient and radiant a manner as it can, and by causing the least amount of harm to the whole of the ecosystem which supports the creation of us as individual beings. So we have a huge amount to offer to it. The issue is, how do we detoxify eyes that have become capable of inflicting suffering, and frankly speaking, who themselves are in a great deal of suffering? How do we detoxify those? And how do we strengthen the eyes that are on the journey towards harmony, towards fitting in with the whole of this incredible creation? How do we reconnect these eyes for them to realize that they are part of a very, very large organism, this earth, this planet, which is of immense beauty, and it too has a sense of I. And so this I-ness is actually something which we should embrace and engage with, rather than the instinctive Hindu teachings, which are I is a terrible thing, ahankara, the fact that I act could be a terrible thing. Ahankara we grow as being, oh no, it's terrible. But ahamkar, if it's in service of the whole and of every single life form, is a very, very valuable and immensely important I. On the battlefield, a particular type of I was necessary. And that's what the whole of the Bhagavad Gita is designed to try and achieve, a sense of I, but with a responsibility to the us. So I is super important. I don't think there's ever been a time when the I's that are being generated and spawning all over the place have been as confused as they possibly can. Um, Eyes are very important, and hopefully we can start to contribute and help heal many of the suffering eyes and get them to work better in a manner which serves all of us.
Great answer. And I think I learned in a very hard way from one of my teachers that when I used to say, we will complete this, and he would say, again, you're forgetting Bhagavad Gita. Because Bhagavad Gita says, Kadishe Vachanam Tava. He says, tell me what I should do. And like that, everybody should hear what they should do. So it's a, then the thing begins actually, and then we can see that how collectively, when individually all of us do a responsibility, then collectively a bigger things are achieved. Now it's important to know what is the responsibility in this time. What times that we are facing, it's a new type of challenges. And when the enemy, unseen, unknown, but results are seen, what they do, actions. So through their actions you can know who is an enemy, not by the color of the skin or the face. So their actions are always proactive. They are there to agitate you. They are there to question you. They're there to demean you or humiliate you constantly. And either we keep reacting all the time, or we do something which is tangential, proactive, and doesn't give them a chance to act. So what is your viewpoint on that?
Well, a great segue. I'm going to start from where does one act from? Because this, I think, is unique to the Sanatani perspective. And again, Sri Krishnji, his purpose was to try and encourage Arjuna to transcend all of his identities, all of the I's, such as I'm so and so's brother, I'm so and so's son, I'm so and so's shishya, I'm a kshatriya, etc., etc. All of these are individual identities. And what Sri Krishnji was wanting to do was to take him out of each and every one of those identities and say, hang on a moment, look at all of those from this particular place. Now, the particular place that he was being guided to is something which we are unique in that we have had probably the longest time on the planet to record how to access that place, how to situate yourself in that place. And once you're established in that place, then how to come out and use the eyes as means of communicating and of interacting. The eye then becomes an interface that you select according to circumstances. Now, in the Yoga Sutras, that place is so clearly defined. Yoga is identified very clearly. Yogash chitta vritta nirodha. The vrittis are in fact the threads which weave the fabric of all of the eyes. And what the Yoga Sutras teach us is there is a place where all of the vrittis become completely quiescent and tranquil. And from that place, you get a glimpse of what it is that you are when there are no vrittis present. So remember, no vrittis means no identities. Absolutely no identity, no identification with physical form, no identification with nation, with religion, with gender, with physicality. There is a place where all other identities cease. And so in that place, you get a glimpse of what it is that you really are. Now, once you've had a glimpse of what it is that you really are, you know that everybody else is also exactly the same. But they may be entangled in the dance of the vrittis, in the intersectionality of all of the various identifications. And all of these identifications are excellent fodder for those who want to prevent us from accessing that one place where we are completely the same, Atma. And so when you work from that particular place, you can engage in the dance of vrittis without actually being trapped in those vrittis. You can engage with somebody who is determined to repeat what they have heard, that they are a particular religion. And you can engage with it knowing that what they are doing is they are replaying words and feelings that they have received from outside. And they're attached to those words and feelings. But those words and feelings are not necessarily the essence of what they are. So you can compassionately engage with anybody who is stuck in identity consciousness. Now, if you have a look at what's happening at the world, I don't think there's ever been a time when we have had so many of these vritti based identities competing and conflicting with each other. And not only are they conflicting, we seem to have developed systems in human society for generating more and more of these conflicting identities. And this is where I think we have a unique opportunity, but also a responsibility. Because if those of us who are part of a tradition which has mapped this territory before, if we are the ones who have this map on how to take a person from identity suffering to freedom from identity, we also have the responsibility. And we have to stand up, step up, and shoulder this responsibility because nobody else can and nobody else will. And so this is really the time for anybody who is connected with Sanatana Dharma. If they're engaged in exploration using Sanatana Dharma's toolkits, they need to finish that journey. They need to make rapid progress and get to the stage where they can actually say, actually, I understand and I know what Aham Brahm Asmi really means. I know what Tattvam Asi really means because I've had a tiny glimpse of it. So those of us who are from the traditions, we need to move on and not sit on our bottoms enjoying the material comforts that are so seductive. And those people who are stuck in suffering, they need to be given the support that we can give them. So Hindus, Buddhists, Sikhs, whatever it is, if you have the gems, the seeds of Sanatana Dharmic understanding, it's time to step up and engage with society's problems. There is no problem which is afflicting human society on the planet at the moment for which we haven't encountered in our 17,000 plus years of existence and codification. So we really do need to step up and engage and act. That's the key. We have to step up and act now in every field, every sphere, every arena, every forum. We need to be present, contributing a dharmic perspective.
Recently, I was called by some California state education department to work on the textbooks, and
Mm.
they found me from Sattology books, and they said we're inviting you for helping us. They were shy, and I participated in a large group of gathering of people there who were from multiple religious backgrounds. Most of them openly opposed putting the history of Hindus in America in their textbook.
Mm.
And the Indian word was accepted, but when I pointed out that the word Indian doesn't mean anything other than the colonial name of India, it doesn't mean anything with the people or the culture. And if you look for majority of people from India into this country is hardly 4 million or 4.5 million. But there are more Hindus in America than people who come from India. There are Hindus in America from Africa. For last 3 generations, they are from Africa. They are from South America, Barbados, or Trinidad, Tobago, and many other parts of the world, Jamaica. Now, and there are other Hindus who are from Europe also, who have come and settled in USA. So if you calculate the overall Hindu population, then Hindu is a unique identity in its own and a much larger number. And I'm not even counting those yogis who claim to be connected to Rishikesh. And that is a huge number. Rishikesh is one of the most popular yoga destinations for most Americans. In fact, sometimes in 2 years back, someone from the UP government official said that we have more Americans than any part of India, and they're all yogis. and they're sitting in different parts. So my question to you is, given this attitude, w- what the Indian community needs to do in USA to protect their own identity, because they're all sleeping, looks like.
Well, the the trope of the sleeping Hindu is very famous. You know, I've seen comedy sketches where people go, "Shh, Hindu so raha hai." You know, the Hindu is asleep. Don't disturb him. And that's okay. It's good to be that comfortable in your own skin and in your own life within limits. Now, what you've raised, this whole issue about the Californian textbooks, it actually strikes at the heart of a problem that we have to face. And the problem is that we need to articulate, we need to learn the language and the vocabulary with which we can express the fact that not allowing us to define ourselves is actually against our own human rights. It's a very colonialist attitude which says, I can define your history and your identity for you. I mentioned Macaulay at the outset, that his example was that we're going to create a particular type of Indian. And the mechanism that they wanted to use was to define what it is that a Hindu is and that an Indian is. And anybody who is saying, we know better than you what your identity is actually transgressing. That is, there are so many psychiatric and psychological terms for a person who does that to a relationship. If in a marriage, one person is dictating to the other person that this is actually who you are and what you are and how you should behave and how you should think of yourself, then that is abuse and that's violence on a deeply emotional and personal scale. What's the difference in people who are not of the tradition deciding the parameters and the framework in which another cultural identity chooses to express itself? I think there is a fundamental problem there, and this issue should be pursued on the basis of human rights. The world is going through a process, a glorious process of decolonization. People who colonize lands are beginning to understand that they have no moral right of ownership and control of those lands. Those same people who colonized identities, who colonized cultures, and indeed colonized spiritual traditions, have equally no moral right to be in that place at all. And one of the things that our community is now beginning to learn is rather than engage with the intention of educating, when somebody has transgressed across a boundary and taken up residence in your home, whether it's physical or whether it's emotional or whether it's intellectual, you don't engage in a conversation until you have thrown them out. They have to be ejected from that place because they have no right to even contribute or participate in that place. You know, this is one of the classical things about Hindus. Wherever we go, we have self-managing communities. You know, we have communities which by and large can be transplanted into any fertile soil, and we will create a thriving, prosperous, very humanist, very open and friendly, and quite civilized society. And because we can do that, we actually really don't need to have anybody else telling us what we should be doing unless they have exceeded our capacity to do that. And if they haven't, and they are interfering and they are interlopers, then really somebody needs to explain to them the principle of, I think it's called the white savior psychosis, the automatic assumption that you have some sort of moral and intellectual superiority, completely unscrutinized and completely not based or established on any foundation of validity. That's white savior attitude is defunct. It belonged to the last millennia. It's no longer of any use and it's actually of harm. And so I would suggest that anybody who is denying a Hindu the right to call themselves a Hindu and to describe and determine what a Hindu is actually inflicted. They have a colonialist mindset and they really do need to be removed because it's an act of harm. I would say it's an actual act of cultural colonialism.
Now I'll disclose you the identity of people who oppose the word Hindu.
Yeah,
These are our prominent Indian Americans who actually opposed me in that group as well. because they, and obviously the guide is, obviously they have a different agenda, the person who's deciding the course, but it is the people. I think it's the state departments, uh, they have to selectively, they have to select people very scrutinizingly. First of all, and this is a message to many of the state officials might be watching this, and my advice to you is, you get to come to people like me, and there are many other people better than me, or like me, or equal to me. You have to approach people who actually practice this Sanatan Dharma, not just talk about it. So the word Sanatan Dharma is very common word, you can search out on the Google, but it's colloquially known as Hindu. So my next question to you is, Pandit Satish Sharma ji, is that the problem in the leadership from the Hindu community sometimes is, see, with Americans, some of the Americans don't know anything about us, and they would like to hear, and they have to present a voice. So instead of going through the process of others defining, or our own brown Angrej defining, which is a problem here, which is the highly leftist communist ideologies of these people. They, the words that they choose is, Punjabi is fine, the Jain is fine, and the Buddhist is fine. Buddhist is also not fine nowadays, but so Jain is fine. But when you say the word Hindu, that's where they have a problem. So
You see, it's a wonderful conundrum, and it's not just confined to Indian origin Americans. It's also a symptom of the diaspora community wherever they are, but equally, it's a crisis of identity amongst Hindus in India as well. You know, I mentioned that there was a mission, a distinct strategy which was leveraged, and the purpose was to detach Hindus from their ancestral identity and to recreate, almost like grafting a whole different set of values onto the branch of that ancient tree of Hinduness, which has been growing for such a long time. But I don't view that as a problem because, remember, as a community and as a society and as a civilization, we are in a recovery period. We had 1400 years of sustained aggression, the most hostile aggression that the planet has known. And the intention of that aggression was to not only to steal natural resources, including human beings, from the Indian subcontinent and transplant them in the Middle East, but also to prevent the native Hindu identity from flourishing, because the native Hindu body of knowledge has the capacity to undo belief-based identity creation. The moment there is one Hindu who can speak the language of the people and tell those people that they in fact are divine, and show them the way in which they can experience their own divinity, the whole house of cards upon which colonial religious belief systems works comes tumbling down. So there was a very concerted effort for about 1400 continuous years to destroy and erase this understanding of humanity from the planet. So it's not unreasonable that members of the Hindu community and Hindu family are still in a post-traumatic stress disorder stage. They are deeply conflicted in terms of having the capacity to articulate who they are. For fear, there's a deep-rooted trauma which denies them the freedom to, with radiance and with confidence, say, this is who we are and this is the information and wisdom we carry. For 1400 years, they had to bow their heads. As you know, after the Rowlatt Acts in Punjab, whenever a Hindu or a Sikh was passing by a white British Anglican, the Hindu had to crawl on his stomach. We know of so many history records, millions of incidents where people, if they were passing a mosque, they had to crawl on all fours. There are so many of these instances which are embedded now in our consciousness and in our community psyche, that the Hindu to stand up and say, this is who I am, is something that is being relearned. What we have to do is we have to turn to our community and ask the question, who speaks for Hindus? And this is a wonderful project to be done. I'm doing it here in the UK. And in that scenario, I've actually roadmapped a journey from Hindu, Hindoo, which is the British construct of what a Hindu is, to Hindu with a U. And there are steps of recovery on that journey. And so as I roadmapped that, it also occurred to me that this is a great template for identifying who's qualified to speak for Hindus. There are numerous people who are not of the Hindu tradition, they're not Indian origin, and yet they are more qualified to speak on our behalf than many people who, on paper, look as though they should be speaking, but actually the moment they open their mouths and start to say things, you can hear this is Hindu speak, spelt with T, two O's at the end. One of the other caveats, one of the warnings that I'd like to sound though, is that there are established vested interests who do not want Hindus to work this out for themselves. There are groups who are very happy to be able to tick the diversity of opinion box, the diversity of appearance box, without having the discomfort of having to handle the diversity of opinion reality. And so there are lots and lots of people who gravitate towards patronage, towards being accepted and acknowledged by the establishment, and who fit the mold of what a Hindu should be. I call them Hindu eye candy, in that they are there to give credibility to the appearance of diversity whilst not having to deal with the reality of it. And so we have to identify in our own community those people who are actually what I would call disparagingly and rightly disparagingly so, house Hindus. So they are Hindus who are brought into the house in the same way that African Americans used to be brought into the plantation owner's house. They're given special treatment, they are mollycoddled, they're made to feel a little bit better than most of the average Hindus, but they are dancing to a tune which is not in the interests of anybody. And so we have to do this as an exercise in our own community. And let's open it all up. Let's work out the template and let's do it very publicly. Let's genuinely bring accountability to our community. And we will have a leap forward. Some people, tragically, like Bhisham Pitama, right, will have passed their sell-by date. They will have gotten to that stage where they're actually a hindrance to the flow of the next generation. And we'll have to find a way to encourage them to step aside to let the flow continue. But this is our work to do, and we should do it, and we should do it with a big smile and a great enjoyment that this is really good progress for the whole community. If we can do it, then the generations flow successfully. Otherwise, the community becomes constipated, and those elements which prevent the effective flow of digestive juices, they need to be removed. So we need to encourage our own community to put its own house in order, and it'll be a great contribution that we can make at that time. So it's good news. I don't have any issues. I don't feel anything negative about it. It's a great opportunity for us to do this.
Great thing you spoke about the roadmap, and I think I would like to discuss and prior with you on the roadmap. Now, coming back on the things that you mentioned, there are a lot of African origin Hindus in all many southern states across Louisiana, across Atlanta, across Georgia, across Alabama, and uh, there are Chinese American Hindus in San Francisco. Now that's the diversity we have. Now, when you look at the definition of Abrahamic faiths, which is when they are talking about unity and peace, is only amongst the Abrahamic faiths. There is no mention of peace with the Hindus. So if Hindus think that somebody else is going to speak for them, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen because it's a there is a concerted attempt to control the American politics and economy, therefore, and the foreign influence, therefore. So that is a concerted effort of these people, not out of deep love for the land of America, but just for the resources which America has developed in last 300 years. And that's what is people are aiming for. And the only people who stand in the way are the dharmic people whom they don't consider as any entity at all in their minds. It's not that we have to convince them, because we don't need to convince them. We have to follow our own path. But but that's the reality in American politics today, also in American spiritual life also, where people.
Yeah, what a conundrum. But there are two thoughts that sprang to mind. One is that there is something called a Hindu identity, okay? And it's as false as any other identity in the fact that it is time limited. A Hindu, hopefully with his spiritual practices, will get to the stage where he can discard the identity. It's no longer a straitjacket, it's like a dinner jacket which is worn at particular events and functions. But what is a problem is when people who are not of the dharmic tradition and not of the Hindu civilization, they try and sculpt for themselves a copy of that Hindu identity garment, because that is as equally constraining. You're, instead of being what you are in your own traditional identity, you're putting on another identity. And it might be that the other identity is more attractive, more comfortable. Yeah, it may well be that identity has got some advantages. But unless it's going to take you beyond even that Hindu identity, then it should be recognized as a stepping stone and a potential problem. Now, the ancient civilizations of Africa and of China, way back before monotheism and these very restrictive straitjacket identities came into appear, whether they're political identities or whether they're religious identities, they were straitjackets on human beings. If we go back far enough in the African tradition, they have dharmic principles in that they had a resonance with the land where they lived, the seasons, the animals who were around them. They were in harmony with that environment. They had languages and practices to explore spirit in its own way. It was the same with the indigenous people of the Americas. They had their own articulation of a dharmic approach, which is one which is a wisdom-seeking, harmonious, established approach. So if the Hindu identity can help people reconnect with their ancestors and their ancestral teachings, that's entirely in agreement with the dharmic philosophies, because there is no harmony that comes other than becoming a part of an ancient tradition where the ancestors are sharing and showering you with their blessings. So it's wonderful that people are accepting the dharmic understandings, but I'd encourage them to use those dharmic understandings to leap in, to explore some of their own traditions, dharmic perspectives and visions. Then what will happen is we will get true dharmic people appearing in every tradition. We don't need to swap one garment for another garment. And so as a stepping stone, I think that's a wonderful thing. Now, there is one aspect of what you said which really resonated with me, and that is the whole notion of politics. Now, we have physical bodies, and physical bodies are sustained by a physical environment. The food processing chains, the ecosystems which go towards maintaining a healthy body, but also an environment in which we can give birth to more healthy bodies. That's vitally important, and that is all about physical resources. It is absolutely and eminently dharmic to engage in the manner in which those physical resources are allocated, are harnessed, are deployed for the benefit of society. And so it would be wonderful if we had genuinely, in positions of political influence, dharmic people from any and every tradition. Somebody who is from an African American tradition who becomes a Hindu, they're becoming a Hindu because something inside that view of life resonates with something that's already inside of them. And so they are finding a bridge to their dharmic inner sense of being. And that's a wonderful thing. What we would really love to see is, once they've found that, to understand that they should now come forward and engage with the political process, and engage with the systems for administering justice, engage with the manner in which society is preparing itself for the next generation. We have to do this. And we need to look beyond the identification of a human being by just their physical attributes. Adi Shankaracharya ji was so erudite and eloquent when he composed his Nirvan Shatkam. And if we use that as the stepping stone for understanding what the person in front of us is. Then we will talk to them at the level of Atma to Atma, and then we have dharmic understandings flowering. One last thing is that if you look at anything, even as simple as a flower, a rose, on the whole of the earth, there are no two roses which are identical. There has never been another rose which is like the rose that's in front of you. And so diversity is a fundamental part of the way in which evolution on this planet works. It's there in everything. And so having uniformity of mindset, having uniformity of identity, having uniformity of ritual, having uniformity of communion, that is an act of violence against the very principles upon which this earth, this whole ecosystem works. Allowing people to grow in the manner in which, with the freedom to expand their hearts and to expand their understanding, is entirely natural, which is why we often say that the Dharmic philosophy embraces unity in diversity. Strictly speaking, we should say it embraces harmony in diversity. Whereas what the monotheistic, monopolistic traditions do is they embrace uniformity in monotony, if you ask me. It is. It's so boring. It's so colorless. We have an explosion of colors and sounds and life experiences and so on in our tradition. But it's a tragedy that the monopolistic traditions diminish a human being to their lowest possible way of existing. Colorless, lifeless, musicless. It's a shade of what it is we are. So it is an act of violence. And I think more and more people are beginning to understand that if you are part of that, then you are diminished and you feel diminished. Whereas shedding it, suddenly you start to grow. And this is the message that we have to offer to people.
So it is very obvious that the Hindu culture, which is based on deep spirituality, I think the soul is discussed extensively in Bhagavad Gita, extensively, and that's probably the only book where so old book which has discussed this in a big way. Other books have been a copy of that. Putting the same measure of sophistication on another faith is a futile attempt, because you cannot go to a lion and ask him to be a vegetarian, or not go to a wolf to snatch in packs. So it's not possible. So see, the to find a common ground for a Hindu will be probably easier with Buddhists than anybody else, because others recognize politics, because that's what they're taught. But so when a Hindu goes on a negotiating table, trying to the famous movie of Amitabh Bachchan, "Puri Dunya Ka Boj Hum Uthate Hain." If that kind of mindset, being empathizing with others, is not going to help their cause, because others have already made up their mind to they treat you as an enemy, and they're going to snatch as much as you can give. So on the negotiating table, when you already go with the mindset of giving, then you actually lose everything, not gain anything from the discussion. So here the mindset needs to change as well. When you're on the negotiating table, like just simple task of designing books, textbooks, which tells a real history: 600 temples, 95 Hindu farm communities, and more than 14 to 15 million yogis who think of India as a source of their faith of in yoga. Now, when you have such big numbers you're talking about, and I'm not talking about 45 million yoga community, and I'm just making it one third, saying just 15 million or less than that maybe. But still, it's a big number, at least more than 10 million. These are the yogis who think that their source comes from India. They are connected to Rishikesh, Vrindavan, or many other places of India, or
Mhm.
Aurobindo Ashram.
Mm.
So, so when you go, whosoever is a negotiator here, because there's so many leaders who are negotiating right now in multiple states, whosoever is a negotiator here, you are not negotiating for you. You're negotiating for this entire group of American Hindus who want to be respected in the textbooks formally in North America. So in that negotiation, you have to understand the other guy has already made up the mind that you are don't matter. You are no identity. You are zero. They have already made up their mind. So if on top of that, if you go with the attitude of giving, that you're going to actually come out empty-handed. with only fake promises. So how do we correct that, Panditji?
So I would remind everyone of a psychosis, Stockholm syndrome. And it was coined after a hostage who had been held in captivity for a long period of time developed the desire to appease those who had taken her hostage. And so it's a syndrome where a person becomes inclined to try and pander to the aggressor. Now, we have adopted this as part of our survival mechanism, and it's now time that we abandoned this notion of needing to please, needing to appease, needing to give a person a reason for accepting that we have a right to exist. That hasn't served us. It's not going to serve us anymore. Now, we have a better concept. We have a better concept. The concept is adhikar. Now, adhikar is the right to receive. So, adhikar means that you have earned the right to engage in a process, to receive teachings from somebody. But whatever it is, it means that you have now got the right to proceed. Now, adhikar is really important. So, in interfaith, I engage in interfaith quite extensively, and I engage in interfaith from our perspective. We do not give anything to anyone unless they ask with humility and with courtesy. Because by demonstrating humility and courtesy and respect, they then show that they have adhikar to receive an answer that we will give to them. Now, most of interfaith is actually a facade. Most of interfaith is populated by by the deceitful or the deluded. And sadly, most of us engage in it on a deluded basis. We have a very simple understanding. You've mentioned Rishikesh. You go to Rishikesh, and a proper yoga acharya will not share knowledge with a person who is disrespectful. The yogacharya has something to give, the student has something to receive, and a fundamental part of that exchange is the downhill flow of knowledge. Okay, knowledge doesn't flow uphill. The pupil doesn't teach the master. And so we have to understand that if somebody wants to learn from us, we should first scrutinize them and say, does this person have the right and are they qualified to receive this? And if they're not, then we should not give it, because what we do is more often than not is give people a rod to beat our own backs with. So adhikar is really important. Now, when it comes to adhikar, you have to be wary of the Indologist, who is the professional scrutinizer of the process of teaching. So what an Indologist does, he wants to learn from the master, but he doesn't want to be lower than the master, because that indicates a loss of status for him. So he wants to receive as part of the teaching process, but not by lowering himself in any way, shape, or form. So what they do is the Indologist will stand to one side and scrutinize the process by which the guru teaches the shishya. And gathering some information, he will then write some fancy words and run around amongst other supposed peers and say, hey, look what I have discovered. But the tragedy is that they will not have received the benefit of that knowledge that a teacher can lovingly and compassionately give to a student who can humbly receive. That exchange doesn't occur. So we have to start using adhikar everywhere. And adhikar will also take us into that place where those who act or speak on our behalf have to be able to demonstrate that by qualification, by experience, by acceptance, and indeed by representation, they have the right to speak on our behalf. If they don't have the right to speak on our behalf, they have no adhikar, and we should replace them with people who do. So this is important for us to understand how to engage as well. We need to start to apply our own templates upon which we engage. Remember, we have already demonstrated here in the UK, we have the Dharmic community is 2.5%, and we contribute 8% to GDP. And we have the lowest representation in prisons. Now that's a great profile. So I've always said to everybody, please do not accept guidance, do not accept wisdom, do not accept recommendations or policies from people who can't match our own social profile. And I'm sure if you were to conduct an analysis of the profile of the Dharmic community in the US, you would find a similar profile. And so if that's our profile, we are demonstrating by practical example what we do and how we do it. Nobody who can't achieve that has a right to interrogate it and deny us the freedom to continue doing that. We don't want everybody to convert. We don't want everybody to change and be like us. But we do have the capacity to share principles which might be of benefit to them if they want to come and ask for it. That's our way, right? And that has always been the way. But when it comes to an adversarial environment, you have to add an extra layer of protection. When it comes to an advocacy-based society, you then have to add an extra layer, which is engagement, voluntary engagement and skillful engagement. And we're moving into that space now. People are beginning to understand that's what we have to do. And it's the best opportunity. We are so well equipped to help civilizations and societies to diminish their suffering, increase their level of ebullient existence. We should be dynamic in doing that.
My last point, and then
Mm.
we'll end the discussion. The people have a wrong notion, especially the Hindu community in North America, that dharma and adharma yudh was in the past.
Don't they just?
A- and it's over. So if dharma and adharma war was in the past, so now people don't have to perform any dharma nor fight for dharma, nothing. Now they can just live on the laurels of Mahabharata and Ramayana. And you rightly said it's a world of advocacy right now. And advocacy means it's like the duck which quacks the loudest gets a cracker. That's the norm of the society today. So if you're looking for somebody else to advocate for you, when you think there is no opposition, everything is one, this is a very faulty ideology, first of all,
You're
then
right.
then you lost before you began. You didn't even attempt to fight for dharma. Dharma means no cow killing, go raksha, krishi, protecting agriculture, protecting our traders, protecting anywhere there is injustice to anyone. That's dharma. We have to fight for that. Adharma means exploitation of women rights, exploitation of children's rights, exploitation of any community, irrespective of whether there's black, brown, green, blue, any skin color. I don't go by the skin color. Any community, if it is prosecuted, that's adharma. So now this fight of dharma, reading Ramayana and saying victory of good over evil, it didn't end with Ramayana. It is still continuing because it's going to continue. So those scriptures are just a guidelines for us to always stand for dharma. Dharma means truth. And here, uh, so when you have that kind of faulty ideology, everything is one. Dharma yudh was in the past. It's a modern world. It's even more adharmic today. It's Kali Yuga progress. So,
Oh, yeah. And if I can share something, we, at an individual level, everybody is on a journey of spiritual evolution. And we learn the four purusharth, right? In our early stages, we have the stages where kam, i.e. passions, are dominant. And then we have the stages where arth, the desire for material abundance, is something we're working with. But then we move to the stage of dharma, which is how does harmony fit in to kam and arth? And then when you work that out, we have the capacity to abandon all of those desires and just exist in tranquility. But what happens when people with that philosophy come to a society which has never discovered that there is a third stage, i.e. dharma? They are completely in a circular existence, oscillating, going around this roundabout, calm and earth, passion and wealth, passion and abundance, passion and materiality. When you have a circle established like that, and it's people who don't know that there is actually a third stage that we can move beyond, they might sense it's there. They might have an instinct that there's something else, but they don't have the steps on how to break that circle and move into it. We have to contribute that. But in order for us to contribute that, we need to recognize that the Samudra Manthan is eternal. It goes on at an individual level inside of us. This is what sadhana is. It goes on in a family level. It goes on in a community level, a town level, a society level, a nation level, and indeed a planetary level. It's always going on. And it always will go on because it has to go on to keep the cycle of existence going. And so we have to recognize that not only do we do sadhana for our own evolution to transcend karma and artha and move into dharma and moksha, We have to do that on the level of our communities and the level of our society. Now, can you imagine the beauty of the great designer who created all of this in a manner and then arranged for us to be scattered right across the globe, carrying an instinctive understanding of how human beings can live on this planet and fit in, and then playing hide and seek with us so that we have to discover it ourselves as part of our own spiritual practice and evolution. You know, there is no getting out of this. The master designer created a play for us where we have got to engage. If we don't engage, we suffer. If we do engage, we thrive. All we're trying to do is work out now, how do we engage in a manner that we can share this teaching and these understandings so that everybody else can become dharmic? That is the challenge that we have in front of us. But you're absolutely right. The Mahabharata is eternal. It is never over. It has to continue. The only difficulty is, in my example of the Samudra Manthan, the Asuras, they've been holding the tail and whisking the oceans for a long period of time. And so lots of poison is coming up. You know, we are the people, Deva means one who can give without wanting something in return, in one sense. We are the people who have to engage and hold the other end and start to whisk as well, so that the poison, when it comes to the surface, we can hold it in consciousness without letting it hurt us and harm us, and we can contain that poison in tranquil consciousness until the nectar of a dharmic existence becomes available and it's capable of being shared with everybody else. We have to do this. The buck stops with us. But recognizing that there is a battle underway and it's waiting for us to engage is the first step, I think, in our community beginning to genuinely contribute to the wider communities.
Excellent point. I can talk to you for hours, but I know you have time. We already had a long show today, and we all have to go. Varnashrama vibhagasha sanushtitasya dharmasya samsiddhir haritoshanam. So if whether any varna you belong to, if we all work for the pleasure of Hari to fight against adharmic forces in the matter most recognizable by them, whatever they recognize as a proper opposition, that's what we need to plan. But if you don't do that, just complaining in the drawing rooms or on the coffee tables is not enough. And I have so many people nodding on the side screen. I can see that just complaining is not enough. Whatever you can do, and and just I totally understand it's a very vibrant community in Sanatan Dharma. There's a freedom of thought and freedom of choosing. That is your strength, as our strength.
It
It's not
is.
it's not a weakness. But there is a common purpose for the entire community to fight against all these adharmic forces. And I see many times communities unite. So I totally don't agree that Hindus are not united is a fact, because Hindus are united. But if we do not act in the right direction, then we appear as disunited.
Well,
And
part of the, yeah, if I may, part of the colonial baggage was that an environment was created where we had to fight amongst our own brethren communities in order to survive in that model. And there is still an element of that as an overhang. You know, we are moving from what I call survival mode. We're currently transcending revival mode, but we have to complete this to move into thrival mode. And what that requires us to do is to move from not only just aspiring to be united, but learning to cooperate. If we can move into a place where we're cooperating, the benefits will be absolutely phenomenal. And that's all the dharmic community needs to do, to learn how to cooperate with each other in support of the much larger vision. This notion of a united Hindu community, I personally see it as a bit of an illusory holy grail, if I can use an Abrahamic analogy. And, you know, aspiring to be united, I think, is a red herring. Aspiring to cooperate really successfully, that will get us the goals and the aims that we want to achieve. And that's not too difficult to do.
exactly, I think great points and great discussions, Satishji. We can talk for hours and hours. So if the time permits, I'd like to invite you next week again for a similar topic.
Gee, I am at your disposal. I have a book which is coming out soon. Perhaps once I'm ready to talk about it, we could do a session on that. It's very
Absolutely.
relevant to the subject that we've touched on briefly today.
Absolutely. My new book is coming out, Sattology of
Oh,
Mahabharata.
wonderful. Wonderful.
So, we'll have another discussion on this. So, viewers, if you love this discussion, uh, this discussion is to be worth implemented in our own lives. And it's not just we did it for the show. And there's a deep message on it. So, if you can, then you can always do that, and you can join us together, uh, and at Dharma and Yoga Foundation. And also, for viewers who'd like to re-watch this telecast that we did, you can always go to the YouTube and comment over there. With that, thank you. Namaskar. Jai Shri Krishna, Jai Shri Ram, everybody. Har Har Mahadev.
Jai Shri Krishna.
Jai Shri Krishna.